All right, it is 9 o'clock. Um, Other people are going to be joining. This is going to be recorded. Just for a quick introduction, my name is Ted Gailey. On this call are my counterparts, Lindsay Heathcote, my program manager, and Zion Brigham, another technical assistant provider at California State University, Chico Center for Regen Agriculture and Resilient Systems. We are the technical assistants for this block grant. I believe I see about everybody on here we've met before. Jamie and Samba. Um, I haven't met you yet, but this is a soil sampling tutorial for California Department of Food and Agriculture Healthy Soils Program. It's an overview of the protocols that CDFA likes to see growers follow for soil sampling. That's required for this award, this grant award. So without further ado, we'll jump into it. So a quick background on Healthy Soils Program from CDFA. It's a state-funded initiative in the past it's been offered exclusively by California Department of Food and Agriculture, and this is the first year they've opened it up to what they call block grant recipients. So California Resource Conservation Districts, or in this case, Farm Bureaus, so Butte County Farm Bureau. It's aimed at promoting regenerative or climate smart practices on agricultural lands within California. And part of this initiative is to track soil organic matter over the course of the grant term, which is 3 years from being selected to closing out the practices or ceasing funding for these practices. And we track organic matter through basically analyzing soil in the project areas that have been selected for implementation of these practices. The soil sampling is necessary for obtaining reimbursement. According to CDFA, they're conducted pre-implementation of any practices and then annually, preferably before the implementation of each annual practice. At the same time of year, at a minimum, we'd like to see random representative sampling locations chosen within these fields. But these soil samples and the results you receive from the test are necessary for obtaining reimbursement. Quick overview on sampling designs. There's about 3 main sampling designs for soil sampling that are used in agricultural soils testing. First is random testing. So this is the most common, and it's at a minimum what is required for soil test reporting for CDFA. It's there's really no rhyme or reason to it. It doesn't pay attention to any variations within field topography or soil characteristics, but it can be accomplished by walking a zigzag line or choosing points at random within a field. We just ask that you be representative in this, but there's no underlying context to why you chose those sampling locations. But it's also what is required for soil test reporting under this application. The second one is grid sampling. This is more appropriate for smaller fields where a random sample may not address all areas of the field. You might get halfway through the field or not all the way through the field with not having taken your minimum amount of samples. So fields that are about 1,000 feet by 1,000 feet or smaller, you may want to divide those up into grids and sample randomly throughout those grids. Again, this doesn't take into account any variation within field topography or soil characteristics. And the third is stratified or zone sampling. Now, this is a common method of sampling for fields that have varying topography, varying degrees of crop health within the field, various soil characteristics. So alkali soils in one part of the field, And then you have saline soils. Another part you may want to accommodate, the approximate percentage of acreage within the field. You factor that into the amount of soil samples you take for each one of those zones. So some appropriate use situation for a random or grid sampling. It's when you have uniform field topography. So 0 to 2% slopes usually within a field. You have a single soil type or map unit present or similar, very similar soil types or map units present within the field. Uniform crop health within the field. And again, grid sampling is used in smaller fields just to accommodate making sure you incorporate the entire field into your sampling points. Now, it's easy to implement and understand, and the sample size calculations and data analysis is very straightforward, which makes it one of the most popular choices for soil testing. The other one, stratified sampling, a little bit how it's designed. So essentially, we see here, this is a 75-acre orchard, so I chose 15 samples, so a little bit larger than the normal number of 10. So what we do is we grouped 3 main strata. So we see this AMC right here, this 3 to 15% slopes. I'm not even going to try and pronounce that map unit name, but it's 41.6%. So I chose 15 samples, multiplied it by 0.416, and came out with 7 to 8 samples in this area. Same with the Capay clay, 0 to 4% slopes. Calculated that out by the percent acreage of the area of interest right here, 0.327. Came out with 5 to 6 samples. And then the smaller strata down here, this Artois gravelly loam, multiplied it by 0.11 and came out with 2 samples. And if you wanted to, you could go and take these outlying soil types, but for the purpose of this demonstration, I just chose these 3 because they're the main representative strata within the soil. Growers looking to implement this may be trying to do so because they're also taking nutrient tests. They're submitting these samples for nutrient tests. They might have poor crop health. You see right here in this northwest part of the field, there's some poor crop health. And yeah, so it's not required for soil organic matter testing through CDFA. It's just a resource that growers can use to identify variations within their field. Growers looking to implement this can access the tools necessary to do so through the UC Davis Mobile Soil ID. This is an application that's available on both Android and iPhone, and it essentially just brings up your location within your field and shows you the overlays of the soil types within that field. So you see here, this is how I calculated it out. Okay, so now we'll get into collection procedure. It's a pretty straightforward process. You're going to combine sampling tools. We'll go over that in just a second. We're going to plot our sampling points, take the samples, obviously, combine, prepare samples, show you how to do that. And then we're going to label, ship, and then we can implement the practices that are selected for funding. And only then can we implement the practices. So these samples need to be submitted prior to the implementation date. Some critical points to take away from this: we have 3 years of reimbursement of soil testing. Now, this 4th year is post-grant term, and producers that have been selected for this grant take on that soil sample out of their own pocket. These are reimbursed at a rate of $50 per sample. We see here we have 2 samples for 3 years, 2 samples a year for 3 years, coming out to $300 reimbursed for your project implementation work plan. Now, one thing I like to make producers aware of is we see here in our project implementation work plan that we have 2 different practices right here on the same field. and it says we have to take one soil sample for each of those practices. But how Replan works it out is that since these two practices were implemented on the same field, one soil sample takes care of both of those practices. So one soil sample takes care of the soil sampling requirements for that field. We still, even though this, if we're going to look at a replan in just a sec, this is still on the same field. It's a different type of field, how CDFA classifies them. So we need an additional soil sample there. So always refer to this project overview right here. This is in your replan to see how many soil samples you are funded for, or else you're going to be going out of pocket for extra soil samples that are not required. So you see here, 2 soil samples a year. Even though we have 3 practices, we only have 2 fields. So essentially, these samples taken annually, as I said before, they're taken before implementation, prior to the first year, and then each year at the same time for 3 years following. So a total of 4 years. This is the link to the recommended soil testing facility that Butte County Farm Bureau is recommending. It's a Chico located soil testing facility. Fruit Growers Lab will have the link at the end of the slide for those that are requesting it. But go ahead, take a second to scan it if you would like. So tools that are necessary for this, we're going to want 2 5-gallon buckets, some type of reservoir, one for taking the samples, and the other ones to carry some tools, and then later on to transfer the samples between buckets and to mix this composite sample. You're going to need a soil auger or a shovel. Shovel works just fine. Ziploc bags, a Sharpie, notepad, clipboard for notes, and most importantly, your replan project design. You see this here. This is an example of what your cover page is going to look like. You're going to have all the information required for taking these soil samples. You see here it says 2023 Healthy Soils Program. It's because CDFA rolled it over. Don't pay any attention to that. If your replan report says 2023 Healthy Soils Program, you just rolled it over into the block grant recipients. So choosing your sampling locations. Like I said before, you're going to either divide the field into a grid, your strata, or walk a zigzag pattern, which is what's required, is that random sampling pattern. Don't need to go any further into it than just randomly sample. But you can also take it on yourself to be more accurate for the results you would want to see. We don't want to take samples from headlands, so areas where there's compaction or high traffic areas, significant areas with lots of issues with crop health, unless you're doing a strata test and it's representative of the field that there are issues within the field. Throughout the field, you can take samples from those areas. We just want to be representative of what's in the field. So even with stratified sampling, that is a way of being testing for representative conditions within the field. Don't take it from compost piles, fence erodes, depressions, and consistent ponding or high moisture content. And then any areas that are subject to manure runoff on field borders, I would recommend staying away from that. And an additional note, just for ease of sampling from year to year, you can drop a GPS point. We'll get into that in a second. But essentially, this is a picture of random sampling in a D2 almonds block at California State University Farm. You see I've dropped a pin right there, and you can add it to your maps and your files to go back year after year. This just helps to stay consistent with your soil samples over time. You don't have to go out and find a new location. Ask yourself, if I'm being representative, I'm choosing a good location. The following years, you have them all in your files from year to year. Quick video on how to do that for those that would like to know. So essentially, pay no attention to my shepherd there. Open up your maps. You're going to navigate to your area you want. You see right there, I have my pin dropped. You can zoom out and you see there's my little marker right there, my location marker. You see all these other little pins on the map. These are locations I've stored in my files throughout the years. It's just, I think it's a very helpful tool. It's been very useful in just pulling up a location, choosing it on your maps, and you're able to trace your location marker over to it. But we'll navigate over to the California State University farm. I'll zoom in. We see this area right to the south of that very furthest south pasture. I pull that up right there. It's in my soil sample locations for HSP folder. I have it labeled as D2 almond soil sample. I'm going to select another location, drop that pin. I'm going to select that little more item right there, and I'll add it to my soil sample locations for HSP, rename it D2 almonds soil sample location. And that's about it for dropping pins. Again, it's just an easy way to remain consistent with soil samples throughout the years. Pull it up on your maps. Easily get somebody out there to take your soil samples if you don't have time, and send these files to anybody who needs them. These GPS points can be exported or saved online or offline locations via various file formats. So taking the samples, a little bit of some specifics on how to do that. We're going to want to expose the top, that A horizon. So we're going to want to get rid of any identifiable soil or soil organic matter. So soil organic matter that is actively decomposing, that O1 horizon. So these are soil organic matter requirements, but we don't want leaf litter or things that have been recently deposited on the soil surface. So we want to expose that top layer of soil. We're going to draw back on the, we're going to dig a hole. We're going to draw back about 2 inches. You see right there in that picture on the top right. I'm drawing back about 2 inches into my soil, little hole that I dug. And then in the bottom left hand, you see about a slice 2 inches thick that I've pulled out of there. Drop it in the bucket, chop it up, proceed to the next location. You're going to repeat these steps 1 through 4 for a minimum of 9 sample locations within your selected field. Combining and preparing the samples. Once you've finished taking all your samples, you're going to want to take a Sharpie, your bag, and you see here I have the APN that is listed for that field. Corresponds to the field listed on your replan report, named the on-farm name for the field, the date, and the organization that the soil sample was taken for. So you see the APN, the field, D1, I guess was D1 almonds. We have the number of soil samples right there, the date, and the farm name. At a minimum, we want 1 pound of soil, so about 6 cups of soil per sample. And just to make sure we're mixing it correctly, these are composite samples. Okay, so this is kind of what I was talking about in that first slide or one of the beginning slides where I was showing you about the different field names. So you see here we have the multi-species hedgerow. It's on the same field, but how CDFA classifies it, it's 2 different fields. Don't ask me why, but they're all the same APN. So that APN would be the same on your soil sample. The different names would be, for the field names would be S1 and S2 walnuts, and then multi-species hedgerow. So in this case, we're going to have 2 soil samples, 2 pounds soil in 2 different bags with the same APN, just different field names. We're going to go over a quick video just to provide some
Good
context.
Afternoon. My name is Ted Gailey, with the Center for Regenerative and Resilient Systems.
at California State University, Chico. Today, we're going to be going over soil sampling for the CDFA Healthy Soils Program reporting requirements. Now, these reporting requirements request only soil organic matter be tested. So before we get into anything else, just know that's what we're testing for here. First thing you're going to want to have when you come into the field that was approved on your Healthy Soils plan is your replan report. Specifically, that PDF that was generated. It's going to have your APNs, your soil sample per field, per year, all outlined on that PDF. This is a preview of what that page would look like. It's a different field, pay no attention to that, but essentially just going over what was in that first slide I referenced. You come into your field, identify your first one. Identified it, representative area, clear off that top layer of organic matter. See, I'm pulling off a lot of fat, some decomposed residues that's distinguishable. It's going to get down where the soil actually starts. That organic matter that's decomposing ends. So you've done that. I want you to come in. You're going to want to dig a small hole, 8 inches deep at least. I'm using a trench shovel here. You have a soil auger, all the better. Main thing is that we need to get 8 inches down. Now you see here I have a nice cross section leading into a nice little pit I've dug. What I want is about a slab about 2 inches thick. See, I'm going to draw back about 2 inches. Pull that slab out. It's a little thick right there. You can shave a little bit off if we want. Take my soil knife out if it wants to come with it. We'll just take a little bit off. Now you're going to be taking about 9 of these samples at a minimum, per sample, per field. If you've outlined in your CDFA replan report, your Butte County, your Glenn County replan report, that you want to take more than 1 soil sample per year, per field, 9 sampling locations at a minimum per each of those samples. Once you've got your slabs out of the ground, throw it in the bucket, move on to your next location. Repeat those steps for each one of your 9 locations. Once you've done that, come back, you'll mix it with whatever tool you have. I'm using a soil knife right now. Your hands, a shovel might work just fine. Once you've thoroughly mixed your 9 or more samples, you're going to take a bag here. Ziploc bags work just fine. You're going to want to take your APN. Again, that's outlined in your replan for the field. Mash it up. I'm in D1 almonds right here. APN, I'm mashing it up, putting it all in the bag. My sampling date, my field, and my farm name. If you're taking more than 1 sample per field, it's going to be a good idea. Put that sample number on the bag. You can also create a small little spreadsheet. APN, field number, bag number. Some of your applicants may have more than 1 APN per field. So it's always a good idea. You are doing more than 1 sample per field to keep those outlined, keep those separate, keep them reported. Now, when putting the samples into a bag after you've mixed it, these are soil organic matter reporting requirements. But that doesn't mean we want a bunch of roots and sticks inside this sample. So what I'm doing is taking out any distinguishable organic matter. Larger roots, sticks, mulch that made it in from the topsoil. I'm taking that out. And we're going to put about 6 cups, at a minimum 1 pound in each sample.
Once that's completed, we're going to seal it up. We're going to talk about, in our next video, shipping and receiving for different laboratories. A lot of that information can be found online, but we'll go over it briefly. For right now, this is what we do in the field. Bag it up, 1 pound, each sample.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that. So after we've gone through our samples, next step obviously is to ship them, label them, ship them, and get the results. Like I said before, Fruit Growers Lab in Chico is the recommended lab through Butte County Farm Bureau applicants. Resource conservation districts may have different ones. CDFA provides the list here, this link here, and there's a QR code right there for recommended plant and soil laboratories in Northern Central California. It's all, you need to make sure that these soil analytical laboratories are using University of California approved test methods. You need to provide a certificate if it's not on this list here. And always contact the analytical laboratory before you send your soil samples in and convey that you need these soil organic matter content results. You need to know if your soils are calcareous before. Not sure how many California applicants are going to have with that issue, but that's going to affect the protocols that the laboratory uses in testing the soils. And we also want to make sure, this is very crucial, that we're sending the soil samples to the same lab each year. There's slight variations in sampling protocols from lab to lab. Hopefully not, but there usually is. So we want to make sure that we're using the same lab from year to year. If you need any further assistance selecting a lab or questions on lab credentials, things of that sort, please reach out to any one of us here at California State University, Chico. We can set you up with an approved laboratory and convey the results needed to that laboratory if you're unable to do so. So one of the last, most important and last parts of the soil sampling portion of this grant is where to submit these results and how to get reimbursed. So here we have an example of a soil organic matter test. We see here this grower has also chosen to select for nutrient capacity, nutrient levels, and that's given them a fertility recommendation as well. But we see here it's soil organic matter, that's at a minimum of what's required. So we have 4.5% organic matter. This producer's got his organic matter pretty high. These results are going to be kept on file for a minimum of 3 years following the grant closing. Just rule of thumb, keep them organized from year to year. CDFA may come back to individual growers on their own accord and request these documents, request the documents additionally, separately from the block grant recipients. So Glenn County, Colusa County, Butte County Farm Bureau, etc. CDFA can choose to come back and request them, not just from Butte County. You'll be submitting them to Butte County or Glenn County, but CDFA may come directly to the grower and request them. So if you just sent them off to Glenn County, Butte County, Colusa, and you think you're all good, you let it go into one of your, just big files. And then CDFA comes around later that year and says, we're choosing you for a random audit, and you're not able to provide them, then they can go back to the block grant recipient and request that the advanced payments they requested from CDFA be returned to them. So we want to avoid any of that, and being organized with your files. You submit your soil samples is just one way to do that. we're gonna upload these results into a shared file application. It's called SharePoint. This is specific to Butte County Farm Bureau. In the past, with CDFA, you've emailed them to a grant manager. And then once they've been verified, along with project implementation, verification standards, those different criteria, then you will receive reimbursement for those activities. One thing that we need to make very clear is that these sample submissions, they need to be dated. So you need to receive a sample, a confirmation of sample submission from your laboratory, the date prior to your geotag photos. So our next slide tomorrow will be going over verification reporting requirements for different practices. And one of those requirements is geotag photos. And on that photo, you're going to have a date of the practice, when it was taken. So we want to see that the compost or the soil sample analysis was submitted prior to the start of the practices. So if you go and take a soil sample and you submit it, the day that you started to implement compost, and then you have to take your photos of the compost being spread on your field, and you don't get the confirmation of submission from the soil sampling lab until a week later. CDFA is going to probably cause you a headache about it. We just want to mitigate any of those issues happening with block grant recipients and on-farm project awardees. So without further ado, I think I've covered about as much as I can for this. Just a quick conclusion. Soil sampling is the first step. We have to take soil samples before any work begins. And you can only take these soil samples after you've entered into contract with your block grant recipient. So signing that contract and then taking these soil samples is crucial before you can start any work. If it comes back that you started work before any of the, your contract was entered into or your soil samples were taken, CDFA can come back and cause a headache. And then another one, the soil samples taken should match the amount in your work plan of your grant agreement. So you need an individual analysis for each one of those samples that are outlined in that project implementation work plan. If you need further instruction straight from CDFA, here's the link here. Reach out to me if you would like this link, or just take a screenshot, however you want. Make sure we accurately label the soil bags. And yep, making sure we're taking the soil samples from the same field each year. We don't need to take pictures of the soil sampling process, just the results with the specified dates that I just outlined. And we want to, keep a record of where these soil samples were taken. So finding a CDFA recommended soil test laboratory, there's the PDF. It's all online on CDFA's Healthy Soils Program page. Make sure you contact them prior, but we have provided you that recommended laboratory through Growers Lab in Chico to send your soil samples for organic matter results. And this brings me back to my previous point. If you prefer to having a test done in another laboratory, not in the list of CDFA recommended soil test laboratories, make sure that laboratory uses standard methodology for soil organic matter analysis or soil organic carbon analysis. And then again, it is recommended that you send your soil samples to the same laboratory during the grant term. This helps reduce errors in sample analysis. So that is it. That's all I have for soil sampling today. Again, we're going to have about 4 more of these little online sessions. For the next one is going to be for verification reporting requirements, where to submit different geotag photos, verification requirement criteria for practice implementations. We'll go over that tomorrow at 9 o'clock. This is our information here at the Center for Regen Ag. If anyone would like to reach out for further questions, please do so. And I think that's it. We'll open it up for questions if there are any.